Okay. So I'd like to introduce you to our speaker for today. Meghan Gieseker is an education associate with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. She received her bachelor's degree in art history from DePaul University, and she attended graduate school to receive a master's of art in art education from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And she enjoys combining her interests in art, education, and history for her work at the Holocaust Museum. So we're really pleased to have you with us today. Welcome, Meghan.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you all today. I'm going to take one moment to share my screen and get set up.
Okay. So when Meghan is talking, I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone so that you can just see her. And again, I will be available on the chat if you have any questions or need assistance. So I will see you in a little bit.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meghan Gieseker, and I am the Education Associate at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. I have been with the museum for just over 2 years. And before coming to the museum, I was in graduate school to receive a Master's of Art in Art Education at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And one of my interests at the museum has been studying art that was created during or about the Holocaust, such as the amazing collection that I am going to share with you today. Before we get started, I did want to say thank you so much to the Vernon Area Public Library for hosting me today. And also a big thank you to Roz, who helped coordinate all of the logistics for this program. So thank you so much. And let's get started. So we will be exploring together one of our current special exhibitions at Illinois Holocaust Museum that's called They Shall Be Counted, the Theresienstadt Ghetto Art of Erich Lichtblau-Leskly. This exhibition is on loan from the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust and will be shown in the Northern Trust and Gidwitz second floor galleries of the museum through June of 2021. So there's plenty of time to come see it in person if you so choose. This exhibition features the paintings and drawings of artist Erich Lichtblau-Leskly that were created during the years of 1942 to 1945 when he was a prisoner in Theresienstadt Ghetto, which had both qualities of a ghetto and a concentration camp. Erich bravely and clandestinely created these paintings to show the realities of daily life. Fearing for his life after other Theresienstadt artists were rounded up and deported, Erich cut up most of his paintings in order to destroy them. His wife, Elsa, took the fragments of his artwork and hid them underneath the wooden floorboards of her barracks, where they actually were able to survive the war, and she was able to retrieve them. This exhibition contains 3 components, which are the original fragments that survived the war, an example of which we can see here on the left, images that Erich restored in Czechoslovakia during the 1950s, which an example of which is shown here in the center image, and recreations of the artwork that he made in Israel during the 1970s and 80s. And that's the image on the right side of your screen. So before we dive into the exhibition more, let me first tell you a little bit about Erich and his wife, Elsa. Erich was born on June 16, 1911 in Czechoslovakia, which at that time was Austria-Hungary. He worked decorating store windows, later pursued studies in commercial design, and ended up working as a commercial decorator. In March of 1937, Erich married Elsa. At the end of 1938, Erich and Elsa moved first to Prague, where Erich worked in construction, and then to southern Bohemia, which was invaded and occupied by the Nazis soon after. In southern Bohemia, they joined a Zionist youth group that was carrying out agricultural training in preparation for emigration to Palestine. Approximately 4 years later, Erich and Elsa received transport orders and arrived in Theresienstadt on November 26, 1942. You can see the deportation list here with their names included in boxes in the lower left corner. Theresienstadt was a cruel and harsh world for the prisoners who lived there. It was historically a fortress town, created in the 1780s by Austrian Emperor Joseph II, and served as a military garrison town. It is often referred to as two names, which you might have heard before. Terezin, which is the Czech name, and Theresienstadt, which is the German name, but it's the same place. The Nazis chose Theresienstadt as a location for a ghetto, as it was close to a railway station and easy to guard, since there are already fortifications in place. Theresienstadt had qualities of both a concentration camp and a ghetto, and it existed for about 3.5 years. Theresienstadt had 3 main roles. It was a transit camp, a ghetto labor camp, and a propaganda tool. It became a transit camp for Czech Jews who were deported to killing centers, concentration camps, and forced labor camps. It was a ghetto/labor camp and holding pen for only certain categories of German, Austrian, and Czech Jews, namely those people who were elderly, veterans, artists, or other prominent cultural figures who might be missed from society, both local and abroad, if they were suddenly to disappear. And in German propaganda terms, it served as a model ghetto. Since it seemed implausible that elderly Jewish people could be used for forced labor, the Nazis utilized Theresienstadt to hide the nature of their deportations. In their propaganda, Theresienstadt was thus described as a model ghetto or a spa town where elderly Jewish people were sent to retire in safety. This was far from the reality of what was actually happening there. Of the approximately 140,000 people who passed through the walls of Theresienstadt, about 90,000 of them were deported to killing centers and concentration camps out east, and about 33,000 people died of malnutrition, disease, and starvation inside Theresienstadt itself. What is unique about Theresienstadt is that amidst all the horror of death, starvation, and deportations, there was also a level of cultural and social life present that other ghettos and camps did not have. The horrors of daily life were always present, while at the same time, there were certain privileges allotted of entertainment, social life, and religion. As author Marjorie Lamberti says in her article, Making Art in the Terezin Concentration Camp, there was a bizarre quality of Terezin, a world in which the pursuit of the arts coexisted with conditions of extreme inhumanity, and where there was an oscillation from an atmosphere of apparent normalcy to an atmosphere laden with fear and terror. The presence of this cultural and social life was due in part to the large number of musicians, composers, writers, artists, and conductors who were deported to Theresienstadt, where their will to create was something the Nazis could not destroy. The Nazis also allowed these cultural events to take place as it promoted their propaganda of Theresienstadt as a model ghetto and a spa town where the select privileged few could live and continue their way of life. Here in this slide, we see an image of Erich's work called The Crooner of Theresienstadt, Hambo the pop hit singer. The image on the left was Erich's recreation from Israel during the 1970s and 1980s. And the image in the background is the original image that he created while he was in Theresienstadt. This image features the pop hit singer Harry Hambo Heyman, who was very well known for accompanying his songs with either the accordion, as we see here, or with violin sometimes. Hambo was a musician who came to Theresienstadt with the Danish transport, and he became a great attraction, performing many popular songs while he was there. The song he sings here in this image is a bit more mournful, as the lyrics say, I am dying, tra-la-la, tra-la-la. When Erich and Elsa arrived in Theresienstadt in 1942, Erich was put to work in the construction yard, and Elsa was sent to work cleaning children's homes and working in the kitchen. For Erich, working in the construction yard was a strategic and life-saving decision, as construction workers were deemed to be essential employees and spared from deportation. Elsa's job in the kitchen also was a more privileged position, as she had close access to the most valuable commodity inside the ghetto, food. Sometime later, Erich was also assigned to work in the graphic and reproduction workshop, which was a subdivision of the technical department of the ghetto. In this position, he worked on many design projects, including set designs for the ghetto theater. And this new job, importantly, gave him access to the art materials that he needed to create his artwork. A common theme in many of Erich's artwork is food, and those who had access to food were deemed to be the wealthiest in the ghetto, like the three kings shown here, the pastry chef, the baker, and the cook. Sitting atop their heads are their chef hat crowns, complete with stars of David, and they brandish loaves of bread and buns and the tools of their trade, in this case, a wooden spoon. In a world where many were starving, those who handled food were deemed to be the richest. The image on the left is one of the few examples in the exhibition of a restored work that Erich made in Czechoslovakia, and the image on the right is the finished piece from the Israeli period. The title of this image gives us a clue as to what is going on in this scene. This image is called A Cardigan for Half a Loaf of Bread, and we see an elderly woman who is bartering with a younger woman sitting on the bed. It was official ghetto policy that young people and others who were able to work received better food rations than the old or sick prisoners. Oftentimes, elderly inmates had little to no possessions to barter with besides their own clothing. So this image shows an elderly prisoner who is bartering with this younger woman to trade her sweater for some of the food that she was eating. There were two pivotal events that occurred in Theresienstadt during 1944. First, the Nazis discovered drawings and paintings made by a group of ghetto prisoners that were known as the Painters' Circle. The group was composed of former artists, architects, a doctor, and an art dealer, some of whose pictures and names are shown here. The members of this group were rounded up and incarcerated in Theresienstadt's so-called Little Fortress, which was the structure in which they housed political prisoners. There, they were interrogated, beaten, and tortured. One of the artists, Otto Unger's right hand was crushed, and two of his fingers actually had to be amputated. After the interrogation, all of them were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Leo Haus was the only survivor from the group. Their capture stemmed from their artwork, some examples of which are shown here. Their paintings and drawings depicted the ugly realities of life inside Theresienstadt. And some of these artworks had been smuggled out and into the hands of the public. The Nazis were specifically worried and suspected that the artwork might have ended up in the hands of the International Red Cross Commission, which was very problematic for the Nazis, who did not want the reality of devastation inside the ghetto to be made known to the broader world, and especially to the Red Cross. The second pivotal moment comes shortly after this event, in June of 1944. At the end of the previous year, 466 Danish Jews arrived in Theresienstadt, as shown here in Erich's artwork entitled Arrival of Danish Jews at Theresienstadt. Most Danish Jews were actually able to flee to Sweden with the help of the Danish resistance, but some were interned to Denmark and then deported. It was believed that the Danish government negotiated a special deal for them as they arrived well-dressed, they didn't have to wear a yellow star, and they were housed in separate barracks as well. Due to the efforts of the Danish king, King Christian X, and the Danish Red Cross, the Danish Jews were also, most importantly, not deported from Theresienstadt to other killing centers and concentration camps. Despite these privileges, 53 Danish Jews still died in Theresienstadt from malnutrition and disease. The Danish king had requested a visit from the International Red Cross as there were rumors circulating that Jewish people were being murdered in gas chambers. To hinder these rumors, the Nazis actually decided to invite the Red Cross to come visit Theresienstadt. Thus, an effort to beautify the ghetto began. Gardens were planted, barracks were renovated, buildings were repainted, sidewalks were scrubbed, gazebos built, and cultural events planned, such as a children's opera and a soccer team. In the image here, we see a young woman who's actually scrubbing the sidewalks. Behind her, we see an elderly couple who's peering out the window of the building. As part of the pretense for the Red Cross visit, the Nazis vacated the ground floors of buildings along the carefully planned route that the Red Cross would take and furnished them with decent beds, wardrobes, and chairs to make it seem as if they were taking really good care of the elderly. Erich calls out this farce by calling this work house arrest for the old and infirm. At the same time that the beautification effort was happening, 7,500 prisoners were being deported east to concentration camps and killing centers so that the ghetto seemed less crowded and to get rid of the sick, elderly, and orphaned children. When the Red Cross arrived for their visit, they took a 6-hour tour along a very carefully planned route, and they ended up reporting back favorably. Even though Erich was not in the painter's circle and he was not on the Nazis' list to round up, seeing these events unfold made him very fearful for his life and also for Elsa's life. He decided to eliminate the captions, slogans, and titles on his artwork and cut up most of the work into pieces, even if there was really nothing incriminating in the images or the text. Examples of this destruction are seen here, where we can see the images cut up and removed of their captions. Shortly after Erich's attempt to destroy his artwork, he was sent to a clandestine construction site to build residences for the German central authorities. While he was away on this construction job, Elsa was actually protected from deportation, as it was law to protect the family members of essential workers, meaning that they were not allowed to be deported. So during this time that Erich was away for work, Elsa managed to hide his artwork under the wooden floorboards of her barracks, protecting them for the duration of the war. It's pretty incredible. After liberation, Elsa was able to retrieve the hidden fragments of Erich's artwork from her barracks. They had survived the war. Erich began his first recreations of the artwork in Czechoslovakia, where the couple lived for many years after the war was over. After having their 2 children, named Mira and Rami, the family ended up emigrating to Israel. Erich and Elsa are pictured here in Israel in 1983. Israel is where Erich began a complete recreation of the artwork he had started during those difficult years in Theresienstadt. As he said, I put all the fragments together and I wrote the missing words next to the picture fragments so that every survivor of Theresien was able to see and understand their meaning. The collection, termed a concise encyclopedia of ghetto life in Theresienstadt, is comprised of the three parts that I've mentioned throughout this presentation. The original artwork that he made in Theresienstadt, the restored and repainted artwork from post-war Czechoslovakia, and the final revised versions from Israel. Erich's daughter, Mira, said that her father's album of cartoons was a key part of the family library growing up. And she and her brother would often flip through the pages, commenting on the bright colors and the cartoon figures, not truly understanding the true story behind the images. It was only when they were adults did they learn the actual stories of the artwork from their own research and investigations. The experiences that Erich and Elsa endured during the Holocaust haunted them for the rest of their lives. And it was through Erich's artwork from Theresienstadt that he was able to tell some of the story. Erich's artwork is unique in the broad spectrum of artwork created by prisoners in concentration camps and ghettos because he chose to focus on the everyday. As Erich said, I didn't waste time crying over the monstrous behavior of the Nazi regime. We knew that. I didn't waste my precious material on the heroes of the ghetto. I just wanted to record the everyday, even banal. The images of everyday life from Erich's work are presented to us in a cartoon satirical style with sarcastic slogans and captions to showcase the absurd and bizarre quality of life in Theresienstadt, where death, starvation, and deportation were happening at the same time as entertainment and culture. Erich's use of cartoons, satire, and dark humor do not mean that he found life in the ghetto amusing. Rather, he uses these tools to highlight the absurdity and employs laughter as a defense mechanism for making life more tolerable in spite of a truly harsh reality. All right, so now we are actually going to take a few moments and look at some of the images from this exhibition together. So I have a few images we're gonna look at, and I have a few questions for you with each image as well. And if you could please type your answers to the questions in the chat function, and Roz will be reading out those answers to me and to the rest of the group. If you're new to Zoom, you can hover your mouse at the bottom of your screen, and there's a little icon that says chat. If you click on that, then you'll be able to type to the group all the answers you have, and then Roz will be reading out those answers as we go along. So for this first image we see here, the title of this image is called Competitors for Potatoes. So my questions for you, if you would please join me in this exercise, is why do you think this artwork has this title? And what do you see in the painting that supports your answer? So I'll give you a few minutes to look at the artwork, think about those questions, and write your answers in the chat. And Roz will read them out as they come in. And the questions are, just to repeat, why do you think this artwork has this title? And what do you see in the painting that supports your answer?
So we have some people that are starting to reply. One person wrote, the mice and buzzards are vying for, hang on, I have to go back up, are vying for the potatoes along with the emaciated prisoner. And another person writes, mice, hawks, vermin all compete with the people. Prisoners face off with rats and possibly avian foes for potatoes. Mice were competitors for scarce food. They had to compete with rats for food. Terrible hunger drives women to fight crows, rat, insects for food. Heartbreaking. The food was so bad that only mice or rats would want it, not even the buzzards come near it. That's what we have.
Great. Yes, excellent responses. And everyone is absolutely right. Yes, thank you for looking closely with me at this. So one of the aspects that Erich highlights is the inhumane living conditions in the camp. So in this image, as you all very wisely saw and noted, we see an elderly woman who is fighting rats and birds for scraps of food in the garbage pile. As I mentioned earlier, elderly prisoners faced some of the harshest conditions in Theresienstadt. So they were given the fewest rations of food, as food was saved for the young and for those who performed labor in the ghetto. So oftentimes they were left to find any scraps of food on their own, or barter their few personal belongings for an extra morsel of sustenance, like we saw in the image previously as well. Okay, great. So let's get to the next image. So we also see images of overcrowded barracks, as in this piece entitled My First Night in the Ghetto, Overcrowded, which, as the title would suggest, depicts Erich's first night in the ghetto. So my questions for you this time, and if you would please again go to the chat and Roz will read out some of those answers once we get them, are what do you see in this image? How do you think the people in this image feel? And how does this artwork make you feel when you look at it? What kind of emotions or feelings are you getting when you look at this image? And I'll give you, again, a few minutes to respond in the chat. And just to repeat while you guys are typing, the questions are, what do you see in this image? How do you think the people in this image feel? And how does this artwork make you feel when you look at it?
There's a lot going on in this particular painting. But some of the comments that we're starting to get are distressed and depressed, which might mean how the emotions that it makes other people feel. The prisoners were all meant to feel dehumanized and demoralized, and that's why they were branded with numbers, not names. The room is crowded, people slept on the floor. The inmate in the foreground peers greedily as the new inmate unpacks belongings. Also, no room in beds for a new inmate. The bald man looks stressed, and that's exactly how it makes me feel. It was so crowded, there was no room in the beds. The only clothing they had hung on one hook. People look sad, resigned to their situation, living in a crowded situation with no privacy, airing their laundry in public.
Great. Great, yes, great responses. And yes, great observations as you look at this, and very intuitive answers as well. Thank you guys so much. And you're all exactly spot on with what you're seeing and what you're feeling looking at this. So here we see Erich is actually the prisoner who's on the floor, and he's the one that has his suitcase and his belongings strewn about him. So Despite the fact that he was sick with a fever at the time on his first night in the ghetto, he could find nowhere to sleep as all the other bunks were already filled to capacity, as someone had noted as well. It's a great observation. So this man in the foreground in the long white coat is actually a physician. And the physician tells him that in order to find a bed, he needs some vitamin P, which means privilege. So even having a place to sleep at night was not a guarantee in Theresienstadt. So thank you guys for your good observations here.
We have one question. Somebody here wants to know, says she didn't know people could bring in their belongings to the ghetto or the camp. So could you just comment on that while we're here?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So actually everyone that was deported was told to bring a suitcase with them, even prisoners that ended up in other places like Auschwitz, for example. It's in Theresienstadt, it is a bit different than in other ghettos or concentration camps. A lot of the people in Theresienstadt were able to wear their clothing, the clothing that they brought with them, and to keep some of their personal possessions with them. As we had talked about, it was a little bit of a different kind of ghetto concentration camp than other ones. There was a little bit more freedom, and there was a little bit of more privileges allotted to people, including being able to keep some of your possessions and to even wear your clothing. Other places like Auschwitz, for example, prisoners who were deported to Auschwitz were allowed to pack a suitcase and bring them with them. They did not ever collect those suitcases or those belongings once they arrived in Auschwitz, and instead the Nazis would go through their personal belongings, take whatever they wanted for themselves or for their families, take the money, take anything that was valuable, sell it for cash, or keep it for themselves or sell it. So it was all just a way to get money from people too. So in this circumstance, though, people were allowed to keep some of their things, and in other circumstances, people were allowed to bring suitcases, and they were never able to collect their suitcases once they arrived at their destination. Okay, so the next image we're going to look at is an image of death. So in the exhibition, we also see some images that comment on death, as in this piece, which is entitled "A Farewell Until We Meet Again in the Mass Grave." So my questions for you this time are, how does this image comment on death? And then what surprises you about this image? And if you could write those answers in the chat again, and Roz will read out some of those answers that come in. And just to repeat for you guys, how does this image comment on death? And what surprises you about this image? Do you have any comments yet for this?
Yeah, I know. I think this one might be a harder one to kind of understand a little bit because the comments are coming a little bit slower, but now we have a few. One person wrote, "Death was a welcome escape." Another person wrote, "It seems like a patient cared for by a Jewish nurse is looking out at a new arrival who was unsuspecting of the horror that awaits him." Another person wrote, "Everyone had the sense that they would die there." Mm-hmm. And then we have a comment, "Only the title might cue that the person in the bed is being wheeled out may be dead, and the officer with the suitcase, because he's in black, could be the angel of death." Mm-hmm. Someone else wrote, "I assume the foreground figure is being deported to a death camp." Mm-hmm. The physician seems to be gleeful as he looks at the emaciated prisoner who is coming to the clinic for help. The nurse is distraught. Mm-hmm. So that's what we have on that one. That one seems really interesting to see what your interpretation of that is.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you all for your comments. I love hearing the different comments that people have based on their facial expressions, based on the movement, based on the characters. Yes, great. Okay, so in this image, this elderly man in the hospital bed is actually bidding farewell to another German Jew who is being sent on a transport out east. Which presumably means he's going to a concentration camp or a killing center. So this man that we see out front in the black with his suitcase and his backpack is actually a prisoner who's being deported from Theresienstadt to either a concentration camp or a killing center. And with grim humor, the elderly man who is a patient in this hospital here says, "See you in the mass grave," as his goodbye and his farewell to his friend. All right, so in this next image, so amid some of the darker themes of the previous images, Erich also highlighted moments of niceties in his artwork, and I wanted to spend time looking at just a few of these as well. So my question for you, this might be a little tough too, but I'm open and excited to hear your interpretations on this. So what does the image suggest about resistance or response to what was happening inside Theresienstadt? You can use the picture and the title for inspiration for your answers. And again, that question is, what does the image suggest about resistance or response to what was happening inside Theresienstadt? And I'll give you, again, a few minutes to type in the chat, to think about your answer and then type in the chat. Resistance or response?
So let's see, we're starting to get some answers or responses here. Let me go back to the top here. One person wrote, I have to go back to where they begin now. There is always room for hope. Another person wrote, flowers can breed joy, but it had to be smuggled in because it didn't exist in the ghetto. People want to include the beauty of nature in their harsh conditions. People may have snuck out or found open gates to plant outside, finding and collecting the bunches of flowers she hides somewhat under her coat. The blonde woman and her scarf are also like flowers, and with some makeup, as well as a lovely image to behold against grim death. She may be a righteous Gentile, blonde hair, and not actually wearing the coat, and she looks out at the open gate where there are some trees and maybe flowers so she can bring them into the ghetto.
Yes, great comments. Thank you, guys. So in this image, we see a young girl who is actually an agricultural worker, and she's smuggling flowers into the ghetto. They had vegetable gardens and other produce that were grown outside of the walls of the ghetto, and they had certain agricultural workers who were the people that were supposed to harvest and tend to those things, although the vegetables was grown primarily for the SS and the Nazis who were stationed in Theresienstadt. It was actually forbidden to cut or have flowers in your barracks, but people did it anyways. In a world that was bleak and dreary, having a symbol of growth and beauty brought hope to prisoners and allowed them to maintain their humanity. So a lot of those same themes that came up in your responses are exactly what's going on in this image. So thank you, guys. And we're gonna spend time looking at one more image together, if you don't mind. This one is another happy note to end on. So looking at this image, I am going to ask you this time, who do you think these people are and what are they doing here? And I'll give you a few minutes to type in the chat this time for our last image to look at together. So who do you think these two people are and what are they doing here in this scene?
Oh, I like this answer. This person wrote, love could be found anywhere, which brings hope for a future and a reason to live.
Great answer.
And another person wrote, of course, getting married under a chuppah, but somehow got lovely clothes, perhaps because they worked for the masters / Germans. Two prisoners fell in love. The cook keeps them alive with the food. The cleaner keeps them clean.
Is that all the answers?
Yeah, that's all I have so far. Yep.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Yes. Excellent. You guys got it exactly right. We are looking at another happy moment captured in Erich's work, which is, of course, a wedding happening in the ghetto. So here we see a young cleaning lady and a cook who are seen under a wedding canopy for their wedding ceremony. So marrying a cook was a good catch for obvious reasons. Hopefully his new bride would be able to share in his close access to food. Weddings were actually possible in Theresienstadt, where rabbi prisoners became the officiants. So against all odds, people looked forward to the future and a life together once the war was over. So thank you guys so much for participating in this part. I've done this presentation a few other times, and this is always my favorite part because I just love to hear what you guys are observing and what you're seeing and interpreting in the artworks. So I greatly appreciate you spending some time looking at these images with me. In 1983, two philanthropists, one of which was Erich's nephew, actually, purchased the collection from Erich and subsequently donated the entire collection to the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust via the Jewish Federation Council of Greater Los Angeles. The first exhibition of the collection was shown in 1984 at the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and since then has been shown in many museums across the country, and a catalog of the collection has been created, which is seen here. Erich himself lived a very modest life, saying, "I was not a famous painter, I was just a little man." He initially began painting houses for work in Israel, and later returned to commercial design, where he worked as a window decorator for a department store until his retirement. Erich created over 150 artworks to document life in Theresienstadt. You can see over half of these images in the hallways of Illinois Holocaust Museum on your next visit. Erich was often quoted as saying, "For me, not to paint would be not to live," which is a testament to the great resistance and perseverance of human spirit that he showed in creating these images, and the wonderful gift that he has left the rest of us to tell the world what happened to so many who faced unspeakable challenges as prisoners in Theresienstadt. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to share these stories with you today. And I did want to add as well that if any of you are interested in coming to see this amazing collection in person, Illinois Holocaust Museum is now open to the public on Wednesdays through Sundays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we've implemented many new safety procedures to make sure everyone stays safe, including required masks, temperature checks, and you also must purchase your tickets online in advance of your visit. Also, if you don't feel quite comfortable coming back to the museum in person, we have tons of virtual public programs going on right now that you can check out on our website and sign up for. So thank you again to Roz, and thank you again to the Vernon Area Public Library for having me today. And I can take any questions that you guys have.
Megan, thank you so much. That was terrific. And I have to say, you know, we've had a lot of presentations in the last 6 months, and I don't think I've seen anyone kind of utilize the chat and interact with people to the extent that you did. So that was terrific. And thank you. And we had some comments that people really appreciated the chance to do that, and thought the presentation was just wonderful, and really getting a chance for people to kind of process it more by offering their thoughts really enhanced the whole presentation.
Oh, good.
So.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Let's see. So there was one question I wanted to know if there's an opportunity for museum members to view the pictures virtually.
Oh, that's a great question. Unfortunately, right now we do not have the exhibit online besides what we just did together. And we actually did a similar lunch and learn for our program, or for our museum as well, which the recording is available on our YouTube channel. So that's a way to see some of them. And you might be able to see some more of the prints through the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust. They might have digitized the collection and you can more closely see the images there, but I'm not 100% sure. So unfortunately, the only thing we have is those recordings from our lunch and learn. So great question though.
Someone would like to know, where and how did he continue to get his suppliers? I think you probably meaning like while he was in the ghetto.
Right. So I'm assuming that means the supplies to make the artwork themselves. Yeah, great question. That's one of the first things I was wondering too when I started learning about this collection as well, as where in the world did he get the supplies to make all this stuff? So he actually was able to, as part of one of his jobs, he worked in the graphic and reproduction workshop. And for that job, he did a number of things. He made architectural drawings, he made blueprints for buildings, he made sets for the ghetto theater plays and productions that were going on. He did all of that kind of stuff. And for that job, he had access to paper, paints, pens, all of the stuff that he needed to create his artwork. So essentially, he just took it from his job and used it for his own clandestine artwork. So this obviously was not part of his job. He was not really supposed to use those materials for his own purposes, but he did.
There's a question from someone who would like to know if there's a book that features these images.
There is a collection, there is a catalog. I actually just happen to have it with me, which with all my sticky notes and notes, but there is a catalog of the entire collection. It has all of the amazing artworks in it as well. So you can look at that, and then some really great essays by some of the staff from the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust. I believe that there are a few of these catalogs still available through our gift shop as well. And you can get on our gift shop online through our website.
Megan, Eric and his wife, are they now deceased?
They are deceased, yes.
Okay.
Let's see, I had it. Yes, so Eric actually died in 2004 at the age of 93, and Elsa died in 2010 at the age of 97. I think, did I say 93 or 83? I meant to say 93.
93, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We don't have any other questions coming through, but I did just want to ask you, I promised everyone I would say, just want to mention that the Holocaust Museum has the very popular RBG exhibit. And if you could just give us an update on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, of course, I'd love to. So we have been very fortunate that we have had an exhibit on RBG called The Notorious RBG, The Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the museum for the last 6-7 months now. And the exhibit was actually extended. So now we will be showing it until January of 2021. It's a fabulous exhibit. It shows, it kind of chronologically goes through RBG's life. So you start with learning about her childhood in Brooklyn, her mother, which was a huge inspiration and role model for her, to her schooling, her law school career. They focus on a lot of the cases that were pivotal to her career and pivotal to our lives right now. And then it goes all the way from, you know, her career as a lawyer to being a Supreme Court justice, and then kind of ends with her wonderful relationship with her husband, Marty, who was truly a partner to her in every way. And then how she became this pop culture icon, from, you know, the RBG workout things that you see online to the Hollywood movies that were made about her, and all of that. So it's a fabulous exhibit. If you're interested in seeing it, like I said, we're open Wednesdays through Sundays. And you can come buy your ticket in advance and come see it in person. Every Wednesday until the end of the year, we do have free admission. So if you're interested in coming on a Wednesday, it will be free. For those of you who also are not comfortable coming to the museum yet, we have virtual options to see the exhibit as well. So on 2 Wednesdays a month, we have a virtual drop-in tour of the RBG exhibit, and you can sign up for a ticket on our website for those tours, and then we'll send you a Zoom link so you can hop on for that. We also just implemented 2 Monday evening tours as well at 6:30. So the Wednesday tours are at 10:30 a.m. The Monday tours are at 6:30. And all that information is on our website, and that's where you can purchase your tickets as well. But it's a great way to virtually see the exhibit too.
Okay, that's perfect, because we just had some questions coming in asking about how to see the exhibit virtually, and mentioning that tonight there is a Zoom program that's available.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, tonight is one, and then I believe on Wednesday we have our 10:30 one too. So you can sign up for both of those. It's free for our members, and it's $10 for our non-members.
Wonderful. Sounds like a bargain. And we had one of the educators or curators from the Illinois Holocaust Museum talk about this exhibit when it first arrived to our area. I think it was the beginning of the year. And that's how kind of Megan and I got introduced and had an opportunity to work together today. So, and we look forward to hosting more presentations with your museum, because I know they're really like high quality and offer like many different points of view, not just about the Holocaust, but like kind of other kind of social justice issues and things of that nature.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and a sneak preview for everyone listening. After the RBG exhibit is over, we will have an exhibit on the life of Nelson Mandela. So we're thrilled to be having that, following, you know, what a pioneer of a woman like RBG. So lots of good things coming up.
Well, great. Well, I think everyone just had a really wonderful experience. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us and participated. We hope that you got so much out of today's lecture, and we hope that you'll continue to join us for library programs. You go on our calendar and see what we're up to. We look forward to seeing you again soon. So bye, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.